want to just say first, thank you for joining me. I know I have some new people coming in. So let me just briefly introduce myself really quickly. My name is Tonya Carter, and I am a transformation coach. And what I do is I help ambitious women who exit out of a relationship. I help them do that on purpose so that they can enter and evolve into a life of purpose and freedom. Okay. And so today's topic, what I really wanted to talk about today, I wanted to talk about dealing with disappointment. I did. I had to talk about it today. Is because, and what made me actually want to talk about this was because disappointments in life are inevitable. They are. Disappointments in life are inevitable, meaning that they are unavoidable, they are unpreventable, and they are just bound to happen, right? That's just the facts of life. So in other words, we can't avoid disappointment. Okay, we can't avoid disappointment. Neither can we prevent disappointment from happening. Okay, and even though we may logically get it, because I know we logically get that, right? There's a logical side of us that truly understands it. However, it becomes hard mentally and emotionally. It's hard to comprehend that from a mental and emotional standpoint, especially when it's something that did not come out in the way that you hope for. Okay. And when something such as a divorce or a breakup occurs, disappointment takes place. Okay. That can be true for quite a few people. And let me be clear when I say this. Okay. Because chances are, you might be disappointed in the current outcome. This is why I say disappointment comes after a breakup or a divorce, because you just might be disappointed with the outcome. That's just the truth, right? As I stated earlier, when something doesn't turn out in a way that we hope for, it breeds disappointment. Okay. And what that means is that we're now facing the reality of an unmet expectation that really isn't in alignment with what we expected. So right now, the current expectation doesn't match the current outcome. Okay. Chances are you can be disappointed in the process of it all, right? There's a process to this. Like when relationships end, there are layers that has to be unfolded. And this is the part that many people don't see. There are many things that have to be faced and dealt with behind the scenes. Okay. Like I think the biggest misconception is all the things that has to be unraveled when relationships dissolve. Okay. Because when you're on the outside looking in, people only see you and your partner. That's all they see. They don't see nothing else. So what isn't shown are the other factors. Okay. We're talking about your children. If you have children with this person, the financial part of it. We're talking about the family dynamics, your friendships, the time that is invested. We're talking about the legal side of things if necessary, not to mention creating new identities. Okay. Like that's the biggest thing, because now when a relationship dissolves, you have to go back and reestablish a new normal. You know what I mean? And you can also be disappointed in yourself. Okay. That's probably one of the biggest disappointments that most people have, because failure can feel very real right now. Okay. That's just the reality of disappointment. Failure can be very real because maybe you feel like I did everything, but it didn't work. All right. Maybe people looked up to you and you failed them. Like with everything that's been going on between Megan Good and Devon Franklin, so many people are like, oh my God, I looked up to them. Right. And when people look up to you, that breeds a level of disappointment for yourself. Maybe you feel like you failed your kids. Maybe you feel like you failed your family. Maybe you feel like you failed God. Okay. From a spiritual aspect, and so that outcome, sometimes we allow that outcome to reflect who we are as individuals. Okay. And so it comes with a level of embarrassment or even feeling shame or even guilt for that part. Okay. Or maybe you can be disappointed in your former partner. That's a reality too. Maybe you weren't the person who wanted to leave. Maybe you didn't want that relationship to end, but because of the unhealthy dynamic, it was the healthiest choice to make. Okay. Or maybe you feel betrayed because based upon the decisions that person was repeatedly making, it didn't display an example of the love and respect that you thought they had of you and the relationship. Okay. And so these are different factors that breed disappointment. These are different reasons why we can be be disappointment. So here's the bottom line. The bottom line is none of this is easy. It isn't. None of this is easy. But what's more challenging? I'm going to tell you what's more challenging. Staying in this energy of disappointment. That's the most challenging part. Because here's the thing. Your feelings are energy. All feelings are energy. It doesn't matter what the feeling is. Every feeling has an energy. So if you have a feeling of joy, okay, it will breed a certain type of energy. All right. If you have a feeling of peace, it will breed a certain type of energy. So if you are having a feeling of disappointment, so if disappointment is the feeling, it will also breed a certain type of energy too. Okay. And when I'm referring to energy, I'm talking about the result from the feeling or the effects of that feeling. So if disappointment becomes unresolved, so if you're walking around with this energy of disappointment and you don't deal with it, it results in constant depression, constant anger, hopelessness, fear, sadness, unhappiness, apathy. And so what happens is the more constant something is, meaning that the more constant you stay in this energy of disappointment, the more it seems to be your reality. Okay. And you also start to lose vision of what is good for you and the world around you. So in a nutshell, when we hang on close to this feeling of disappointment, it unconsciously becomes a part of your identity. That's how disappointment works. So what I wanted to do tonight, I wanted to give you 3 things on what you need to do to deal with disappointment. Because here's the truth, guys. We're still in this holiday season. We're coming into 2022, and we always go on this new year, new me mindset. And I'm going to be honest with you. A new year doesn't automatically birth a new you. You got to make some new moves, and you got to make these moves on purpose. Okay. And so I want to give you 3 things tonight that can really help you deal with disappointment. And here's the first thing I want you to do. And if you're on Facebook or IG, just type it in the comments. The first thing I need for you to do, I need for you to give yourself the gift of truth with 0 judgment. That's the first thing I need for you to do. If you really want to deal with your energy of feeling disappointment, I need for you to give yourself the gift of truth with 0 disappointment. And here's what I mean. This really isn't the time to minimize. This isn't the time to mute. Neither is this the time to be in denial about how you're truly feeling right now. Okay? Neither this also isn't the time to criticize yourself. This isn't the time to judge your feelings. Neither judge the outcome of what has taken place. Okay? All right? And the reason why I say you need to do both, right? You need to give yourself a level of truth, and you also need to do it with no judgment, is because many tend to do one or the other. Okay. You have people that are honest about how they feel, but they judge themselves very harshly, or they judge themselves on the outcome of this experience while suppressing how they really feel about what has taken place. So being okay with not being okay is allowing yourself to be human right now. It's allowing yourself to be normal. Okay. It's allowing yourself to have grace. It's allowing yourself to feel unapologetically. Okay. It's allowing you to get curious on things. See, when you feel disappointment, you have to be curious as to why with no judgment. You have to, because if you don't, you'll try to suppress it or you'll try to act like it's nothing. Okay. So when you're really giving yourself that gift of truth with no judgment, you're asking yourself, man, why am I really feeling this way? So now we're getting curious about things so we can overcome them. It's allowing yourself to seek help. Many of you need help getting through this. And so when you're honest with yourself and you don't judge it, you open up yourself to receive the help. Okay. It's also allowing yourself to deal with it properly. Okay. See, here's the thing about when you have a certain feeling that isn't in your best interest and you latch on to it, it can be projected in other ways that isn't healthy for you. Okay. And disappointment comes, let me tell you how disappointment works. Disappointment typically comes from what we expect and what we hope for. Okay. And so right now you are in a very uncomfortable space. between what you hope for versus what it really is. Okay. And what you're experiencing right now, let me be honest with you. If you went through a divorce, if you're going through a breakup, right? You just experienced the loss in your life. That's why this is important. Okay. You're experiencing a loss of hope, perhaps, maybe a loss of what was planned, maybe a loss of a dream, right? Maybe the loss of companionship. Okay. And so giving yourself the space as well as the permission to be honest with zero judgment helps you grieve intelligently. That's why this is very important. Because if I can be honest, everyone doesn't grieve intelligently. They don't. They do not grieve intelligently. And in other words, what I'm saying is that they don't do it on purpose, right? Because when it comes to grief, this is one thing I do know and understand to be very accurate. It's different for everybody, right? That's the truth, right? It's different for everybody. Everybody's process is different. So one person's process is different. I get that. Everyone's time frame doesn't look the same as well. However, when I say everybody doesn't grieve intelligently, is that many people only make what should be a season a cycle of grief. Okay. Let me know if that makes sense. Sometimes we're staying in grief longer than what we should. We're making it be cycles of grief, meaning that every year, every month, it's the same type of grief. Like we're not intentionally allowing ourselves to grieve and grow through the process. Okay. And I hate to say this, and this might be a very ugly thing to say, but it actually is very accurate in some ways. But some people have become very attached to their pain. Like pain can be an addiction, just like drugs, just like alcohol, just like sex, just like gambling. Being in grief can be an addiction. And some people have no intention on exiting out, right? You know what I mean? And so grieving intelligently helps you feel. When you grieve intelligently, it helps you release. And when you grieve intelligently, it helps you move on. So when we give ourselves the ability to be honest with zero judgment, we're also giving ourselves the permission to know that this will not last forever. Let me know if this makes sense, because a lot of the times we'll feel disappointment, but we don't want to like be honest about it. We kind of want to suppress it or think another year is going to change it, or we just got to be strong and kind of like ignore it. But the reality is that disappointment is real, and it is indeed an energy. And if you don't deal with it on purpose, it can be attached to you. And you don't even realize that you've created a level of a relationship with disappointment, right? And so that's the very first one. The first thing you need to do is give yourself the gift of truth with zero judgment, all right? The second thing you need to do, if you really want to deal with disappointment, the second thing you need to do is that you have to give yourself the ability to manage your expectations. That's the second one. Right? The second one is that you have to give yourself the ability to manage your expectations. Okay. Again, when we're talking about disappointment, we're also talking about the unmet expectations that we hope for. This is why we become disappointed, because we have an expectation and the outcome is not meeting what we already mentally had planned for. Okay. And so what tends to happen is when that expectation is not the current reality, a few things take place. So this is what happens when, that expectation doesn't take place. Your self-worth becomes attached to the current outcome, right? So in other words, sometimes we only are worthy or feel like we're worthy if this expectation was obtained, right? Okay. Another thing can take place is the inability to adjust. Like a lot of the times we can easily confuse expectations with standards. I literally had this same conversation with a coaching client. I have a private coaching client that I'm working with right now who has difficulty processing the fact that the expectation is not meeting their outcome. And so what happens is we confuse expectations with standards a lot. So let me be clear. When you have a standard is a baseline of quality that drives effective actions and good decisions making for yourself. So standards are your guidelines. Your standards are more of what's in your power to do. An expectation is more of an internal belief that something will happen in the future, or a feeling that someone or something is going to achieve something, right? So, in other words, our expectations are strongly tied to our own preferences. Our expectations entertain the idea of how we would like things to turn out or how we would like people to act. Okay. Expectations is more of what isn't in our control. All right. And so when you become so fixated on your preferences, on how things should turn out, you also limit your ability to adapt or alter them. That's what typically happens. Okay. So like, let me give you all an example, because I always tell people I like to be the example. So when my divorce took place, I found myself struggling a lot with the expectations of myself as well as my ex. Okay. Like, I judged myself a lot based on the outcome. That's what I found myself doing. I found myself judging myself a lot on the outcome. Like, I had a mindset of believing that everything I touched or everything that I was connected to was supposed to turn into a certain outcome. That's how I function. That was my expectation. And if that outcome did not meet that expectation, then I connected that to my worth, and I also connected that to my success. Okay. And with that expectation of thinking that I can control every outcome based on my effort, that also placed a false expectation on my relationship. It really did. Because at that time, unconsciously, I held him to an expectation that he either wasn't aware of, he couldn't perform, or never displayed. Okay. And because for me, my expectation was that if I did all these things, then my expectation would be met. Like, I really hope this makes sense. And what that did was, because that expectation did not match the outcome, it created anger for me. It created irritation for me, and a loss of false power. All right. And so what this made me do, I had to surrender. Okay. I had to humbly surrender to my expectations of others, as well as the expectations of myself, and only live up to my standards. And what that meant was, I couldn't control everything, only myself. I truly could not control everything. The only thing that I can control is myself. I learned the importance of effective communication, meaning that I had to stop assuming, and I had to stop thinking that someone should have done something a certain way. See, when you have expectations like this, this is what breeds disappointment too, is when you assume or you think something should be a certain way. And when it doesn't, you become disappointed. And over time, it can create an anger if you're not careful. Because what I realize is that we're all different people. We're all different people, and we all come from different walks of life. And none of us don't see everything the same. And so when I tell you to manage your expectations, the reason why that's so important is because you want to manage your expectations to prevent them from managing you. See, I used to let my expectations manage me, because I used to hold on so strong on what it's supposed to be like, on what the outcome was supposed to be based on what I expected. And as long as I held on to that expectation, it made me very disappointed in the reality, because they weren't in alignment. And so if you really want to deal with disappointment, you got to be able to adjust these expectations sometimes that we have. Okay. We got to know that everybody don't move the same. We got to know that people think differently. We have to realize that, yeah, I might do it this way, but that doesn't mean they do. Right. So I want this to really make sense, because when people tell me I'm disappointed, a lot of the times we're disappointed because that expectation that we have isn't in alignment with the current outcome. OK, and so that's the second one. The second one that you need to do is that you have to give yourself the ability to truly manage your expectations. OK, the third one, and this is my last and this is my final point. OK, this is the third thing you need to do if you want to deal with your disappointment. OK. You have to give yourself permission to be open to other possibilities. That's what you have to do. You have to give yourself permission to be open to other possibilities. Okay, so let me break this down a little bit. When you are in constant disappointment over a particular outcome, okay, your focus, which is also in exchange for your energy, is more directed on the end result of that previous experience. Okay. And the more we continue to revisit this experience from a constant place of disappointment, we're not leaving room or space to create openness for new possibilities. In other words, we're not seeing beyond where we are because we're so fixated on what it was supposed to be. Okay. And so, as I mentioned earlier, constant disappointment results in a loss of vision on what's for you. Right. So, in other words, you're unable to see past what's current. Okay. And the more we embrace and the more we channel our energy onto better possibilities, the more we start to accept the reality of what's current. That's why it's important to give yourself permission to be open to other opportunities. And the more we accept what has taken place from understanding that there's more than just this, then you're giving yourself the ability to create a new normal and focus on the next chapter of your life. Okay, so let me know if this makes sense. So the more we say, hey, there's more beyond where I am, okay, and we start working towards what that could look like, the more we are allowed to let what happened be, as opposed to being so fixated on what it should have been. Okay, give me a thumbs up on both platforms. Let me know if you understand what I'm saying. Because here's the thing about constant disappointment. Constant disappointment can hold you hostage. And I don't think people get this. Constant, meaning ongoing. We're all going to feel disappointed. Disappointment is inevitable, remember. But when it's constant, meaning that when it's continuous, that means it holds you hostage to a chapter of your life. Right? And being a mental and emotional hostage can make this chapter seem and feel like the entire book of your life. It's almost as if you put a period only where a comma should be, if that makes sense. And so when you're being open to what can be, as opposed to being focused on what was, this helps you accept what has taken place with no judgment. Remember, I told you, don't judge yourself with this stuff. The more you judge yourself, the more you start to criticize. And that's not what you want to do. Right? It also helps you turn the page. Right? As I said, this gives you the ability to focus on the next chapter. And so what this also lets you know is that this was a season of my life. Remember, I said earlier, many of you guys are in a cycle of grief. You're talking about it all the time with no purpose. You're constantly fixated on it. You can't sleep. You don't know. You don't think nothing else can be. Your vocabulary words are words of death, right? And so when you give yourself permission to be open up other opportunities, you're now giving yourself permission to turn the page. Okay. And it also gives you permission to pick up the pen and write a new story of your life. And what this does is that it helps us reframe our experience. It helps us manage our expectations. And it also helps you recognize what's really in your power and what isn't. Let me know if this makes sense. I got a few thumbs up on both platforms because here's the thing. I always tell people, when it comes to disappointment from relationships, because, sometimes we do go through things that can be very detrimental, right? And I'm not here to dismiss any of that. However, why leave a relationship only to be in a place of disappointment? Think about it. Why continue? Let me tell you guys, I had a clarity call with a lady yesterday, 46 years old. And she's in a really ugly situation. And I told her the average woman lives to be 85 years old. You almost still got 4 decades in you. Why would you stop now? Why would you give up on you now? And that's what a lot of us do. When that expectation doesn't match the outcome, we'll just stay so fixated on that. And you owe yourself more than that. We're coming into a new year in a few days. What do you want your 2022 to look like? Do you still want to keep talking about the same thing? With no purpose on exiting out? Do you want to keep criticizing yourself for something that won't change no matter how much you want it to? Like, I just really want you to think about that. You know what I mean? Someone on Instagram said my expectations were so basic and simple and easy. So many discussions and it never got met. I wanted him to be present as a dad and husband, and he went and found another family instead. So here's the thing. Your expectations could be basic. I'm not here to justify what they were, right? But even in them being basic, I talked about that in point number 2 about being able to manage your expectations. And I kind of talked about my situation and my marriage. And one thing that I realized was that I held someone to a standard, or I would say to an expectation that they weren't even aware of either, or they couldn't perform, or they just never displayed. And here's also the other reality of the expectation. We cannot make somebody do something that they just don't want to do, even if it is you. That is the harsh truth, right? But here's another truth. That has nothing to do with your value. See, a lot of the times we think when people don't do something, or when we say, well, man, Tonya, it was simple, and it could be very simple, right? But even though they may not do it, that doesn't mean that you're not valuable. That doesn't mean that you're not worthy. It just could mean that that person just wasn't able to give it, or they didn't want to. And see, I know that's the hard part, because a lot of the times, remember, I told you guys in point number 2, when the outcome didn't meet my expectation, I tied it and I connected it to my worth. See, you guys are connecting what someone else do or don't do to your value. And see, that's the part that you have to learn how to detach. Because if you always attach your worth and your value to what somebody else does, your worth and value will always be like this. Because again, we cannot force people to do anything. And of course you took it personal. Of course, why wouldn't you take it personal? You're with them, right? And chances are, if you're giving them a certain level of effort, right, you can't take it personal. That's easy to do. But we also have to know that everything someone does isn't necessarily about us. It's more about where they are in their own growth and in their own development, where they've been, what they went through, right? Whether or not if they really want to be present. Like, sometimes I hate to say this, guys, but some of us know when somebody doesn't want to be present. The energy is there. You can feel the energy. Energy never lies. Okay. And so I'm saying that I want to say this very respectfully, because I don't want nobody to think like, wow, maybe my expectations were too much. It has nothing to do with whether or not if they were too much. Remember, expectations is something that it's a belief that we expect from other people. Your standards are for you personally, right? So remember, expectations and standards are 2 different things. So I hope that opened up and gave you maybe some level of clarity, because you want to work on detaching those things. You don't want to attach someone else's effort or lack of to your worth. You never want to do that. You don't, because your worth will always be up and down. It'll always be shaky, and you'll always question it, and you don't want to keep questioning it. Okay. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Crystal said, please keep this up. I'm trying to do too many things at one time, and I definitely need this. Yes, Crystal, it will be up. Michelle said cycles instead of seasons. Yes. You want to make this a season, y'all. Everybody grieves. Grieving is a part of life. No one is exempt from grieving, but you do not want your every year to be a grieving situation over something that happened a long time ago. All right. I hope that makes sense. Are there any questions? Someone said, I'm learning about that self-worth. Yeah, that self-worth, y'all, it sounds so motivating, right? But self-worth is a tough journey. It is really, like I'm gonna tell you, it took me a minute to get that. Right. It took me a minute to get that Disco Diva 1221. It took me a minute to really not connect other people's moves on my worth. Like I had a tough time with that. It took me a minute. But when I divorced that, remember, when I had to divorce that part of myself, it freed me from a lot. It doesn't mean that I don't have an accountability to things. It doesn't mean that if I'm in a relationship that I shouldn't value what someone is informing me. But I can't keep tying my worth to what someone does or don't do. It'll always make me question myself. I was very hard on myself, and I think that's what you're doing too. I think you're being extremely hard on yourself, and I think you need to go back when I said to point number one. Give yourself that level of truth, but don't judge yourself for that as well. Don't judge yourself to this. And yeah, you might be 55. That's fine. I work with women in their 50s as well. I work with people in their 50s. Sometimes we don't get it. That's fine. You got it now. That's all that matters, right? That's all that matters. Sometimes, everybody gets it at different times. I think the most important part is that you have. I had a lady who got it at 70. She was 70 years old, and she really came to that revelation at 70. And so I just wanted to share that with you as well. Hey, Julie, how you doing? Happy holidays to you too. Are there any other questions when it comes to disappointment? I don't know if there are any other questions, but I hope that this helped. If you all know that you need a jump start in your 2022, I am having a 5-day breaking through the breakup challenge. Okay. And that starts on January the 3rd. It's free. It's for 5 days. The link on Instagram is in my bio. For Facebook, the link is in the post. And so if you know that you are ready to really be intentional about what you want to see in 2022, then I really do highly recommend that you sign up. And if you listen to my podcast, if you follow me, and if you enjoy that, you would definitely enjoy this challenge. Okay. This is something that I take very seriously. I know the importance of detachment, and I want to be able to help you jumpstart. Like I always tell people, a new year doesn't necessarily mean a new you. We got to make some better moves. Okay. And we truly have to do that on purpose. Renee, I see you in. I don't know why you in. You good, but you in anyway. I'm glad as always. And so if there are no more questions, guys, I'm going to leave this up on my Facebook. And I'm going to leave it up on my IG as well. I'm going to go ahead and leave it up on both platforms. And so if you want to go back and tune in, and if you do tune in, just hashtag replay, let me know that you're watching it. As always, I appreciate you. If there is a topic that you want me to cover, then let me know. Cause I'll be going live again this week, and I'll be on live all next week for my challenge. But if you know that there's a topic that you want me to discuss, please let me know in the comments, or you can DM me, and I will be more than welcome to look at it. Okay. All right. So if there are no more questions, thank you all again for tuning in. I appreciate y'all. It feels good to be back on live. It's been a minute, so I'm excited about being back on live. Make sure you share it. I love you all. You all have a wonderful and amazing night, and we will talk soon.